I've always believed that Christmas is supposed to be about warmth, family, and love. But for me, Christmas became the season that broke me. My name is Elena Carter, and I grew up in a family that never really felt like home. From the outside, we looked like the perfect suburban picture. A successful father who owned a mid-sized construction company. A stay-at-home mother who was always perfectly dressed. And two daughters, my younger sister Samantha and me. People said we looked like we stepped out of a holiday card. Our big brick house decorated every December with glowing icicle lights, wreaths on the windows, and a 12-foot Christmas tree visible through the bay window. But appearances, as I would later learn, are the cruelest of illusions. I was the oldest, the responsible one, the one who did the dishes, folded the laundry, and helped Mom cook when she was too tired. I learned to pack my father's lunch in middle school because he worked long hours and nobody else would. I was the quiet glue that kept things from falling apart, though nobody noticed. My sister Samantha, well, she was the opposite. Blonde, beautiful, and effortlessly charming. She could smile once and get away with anything. Teachers adored her, neighbors spoiled her, and my parents treated her like royalty. When she left her laundry on the floor, Mom picked it up. When she failed a test, Dad chuckled and said, "She's just not a bookworm like Alina." When I failed at anything, which was rare, there was no chuckle, no indulgence, only disappointment. From as far back as I can remember, Christmas made this imbalance sharp and painful. While Samantha got dolls that talked, play kitchens, and later, jewelry and designer handbags. I received practical gifts. Socks, a notebook. One year, an electric toothbrush. "You're the sensible one, Alina," Mom used to say. "You appreciate useful things. Samantha's still a child, she needs to enjoy her youth." I swallowed those words year after year, convincing myself that maybe they were right. Maybe practicality was a form of love. The first time I truly felt the difference was when I was 10 and Samantha was 7. That Christmas, she unwrapped a Barbie dream house, complete with lights, a working elevator, and a pool. She squealed so loudly that Dad recorded it on his camcorder. I, on the other hand, unwrapped a hardcover dictionary. "See," Dad said proudly, as I sat there holding back tears. "This will help you in school. Much better than plastic toys." That video stayed in the family archives, replayed every few years when Dad felt nostalgic. Each time, my face in the recording burned me with Shima, little girl pretending to smile, while her sister played with her new dollhouse in the background. As we grew older, the differences didn't fade. They grew wider. By the time I reached high school, Samantha had her own laptop, while I had to use the old family computer in the study. When she wanted to join cheerleading, Dad paid for private tumbling lessons. When I wanted to join debate, I was told that club doesn't lead anywhere. I worked part-time jobs babysitting, cashier shifts, tutoring neighborhood kids, just to buy things I wanted. Meanwhile, Samantha snapped her fingers and gifts appeared. Still, I kept telling myself, just endure. One day I'll be independent. One day it won't matter. But deep down, resentment grew like a shadow. By the time I was 20, Christmas had become a ritual of dread. I was in college on a scholarship I earned myself with no help from my parents. I worked evenings at a diner to cover what the scholarship didn't. Meanwhile, Samantha, who was 18 and barely passing high school, spent her weekends shopping, posting selfies, and whining about how stressful her life was. That December, the tension in the Carter house was heavier than ever. Dad bragged constantly about a special surprise he had prepared for Samantha's graduation. Mom fussed over Christmas decorations like she was hosting royalty. And me, I was exhausted. Finals had drained me, and the thought of spending the holiday under their roof filled me with unease. But I had no choice. Rent near campus was too expensive to stay through the break, and the dorms closed. So I packed my bag and went home. The first night back, the difference was already obvious. At dinner, Mom served Samantha her favorite lasagna with extra cheese, while my plate was smaller with less filling. Dad asked Samantha about her plans for college, even though she had none. When I tried to share my recent award from a writing competition, Dad cut me off. "That's nice, Elena," he said flatly. "But have you thought about getting some real work experience instead of chasing hobbies?" Hobbies he called my passion, My dream of becoming a writer. A hobby. I clenched my fork so hard my knuckles went white. Samantha smirked across the table, enjoying my silence. In the days leading up to Christmas, Samantha got new clothes, hair appointments, and even acrylic nails paid for by Dad. I was told to make myself useful by wrapping presents, cooking and cleaning the house for the big family gathering. Christmas Eve was the worst. While Samantha went out with friends to a fancy dinner, I was stuck in the kitchen baking pies for the next day. Mom hovered over me, criticizing everything. "You always make the crust too thick. Why can't you do it like your sister?" "Because she's not here," I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" Mom snapped. "Nothing," I said, swallowing the anger burning my throat. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I told myself, just get through tomorrow. Smile, endure, and then it'll be over. But I didn't know that Christmas morning would change everything. Christmas morning started with the smell of cinnamon and oranges and the soft hiss of the radiator, small comforts that almost convinced me the day might pass without incident. I woke before my alarm, like I always did on holidays. It's the way I used to as a kid when I still believed surprises were meant for everyone. For a few minutes I lay there, cocooned in the thin quilt from my childhood, letting the quiet pretend to be peace. Downstairs, I could hear my mother moving quickly, cupboards thudding. The clatter of a roasting pan sliding onto the stove, the high, impatient click of her heels on the tile. The house had its Christmas perfume, pine needles, baking sugar, and the sharp, expensive sweetness of the candle Mom only lit for company. I stared at the ceiling and told myself to inhale, exhale, stay small, stay steady. When I went down, the tree lights were already on. The 12-foot spruce stood to attention in the bay window, dripping with gold ribbons and glass birds. I could see my blurry reflection in a silver orb, hair in a bun, oversized sweater, the face of someone trying to make herself invisible. Mom turned when she heard me. Finally, she said, "Make the coffee, please. The Carters will be here by 10, and your father wants the ham in at 9:30. "I can do the coffee," I said, moving to the machine. "Do you need help with the fruit tray? Just don't make a mess." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Where's Samantha? She was supposed to help with the centerpieces." I stared at the staircase. "Probably still asleep." Mom sighed. "She had a big night." Don't start. One didn't. I measured grounds, poured water, lined up the mugs. My hands were steady enough, though my stomach buzzed with the kind of nervous electricity I used to feel before debate tournaments. Coffee filled the air. I set a mug by the edge of the counter for Dad the way I'd been doing since middle school, 2 sugars. No cream, spoon, resting on the saucer. Old habits die hard when no one else will do them. Dad came in, rubbing his hands together. "There's my girl," he said, but he was looking over my shoulder at the backyard, where the snow lay clean and untouched. His eyes were brighter than usual. "Big day." "Yeah," I said, handing him the mug. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." He took a sip, then looked at me, almost as if he remembered I existed. "Alina, after breakfast, we'll open family gifts first. Then, when everyone arrives, we'll do the larger surprise. Make sure your phone's ready to record." "Record?" I asked. "For your sister," Mom said, in that tone that suggested I'd missed the obvious. "We've planned something special." "Of course," I said. "I'll record." Samantha appeared at the top of the stairs. Little parade all by herself, hair shiny, lashes curled. Wearing a cream sweater that probably cost more than my textbooks for a semester. She looked fresh despite her big night. And when she saw Dad, she scampered down like a golden retriever. "Daddy?" she sang. "Merry Christmas." He put his mug down to hug her. "There she is. Look at you. Beautiful." I turned away and stirred my own coffee for longer than necessary. I could feel Mom watching me, either to make sure I didn't spill or to ensure I didn't roll my eyes. The living room felt too bright, like a stage. I already knew my role, the competent, quiet background character who moves the props and never stumbles into the spotlight. We ate a quick breakfast toast, scrambled eggs, a token slice of orange I couldn't taste, then moved to the tree. The floor under it was a display. Big boxes with tasteful wrapping paper patterns, elaborate bows, small velvet pouches. Samantha was already kneeling and shaking the biggest box, her manicured nails glinting. "For me?" she asked, batting her eyes at Dad. "You'll find out," he said, grinning. We started with stockings. Samantha's overflowed with makeup and gift cards and a delicate little bracelet that Mom fastened on her wrist. Mine had a pair of knit gloves and a travel-sized toothpaste. "Practical," Mom said, as if I should be grateful for good dental hygiene. I shoved the toothpaste back inside so no one would see the way my hands trembled. Next came the family gifts. Samantha unwrapped a cashmere scarf, new headphones, and a perfume set. I unwrapped a planner with a floral cover and an unbranded sweater that fit fine, but felt like it had been chosen from a clearance rack by a stranger. I put on a smile. "Don't make it about you. Don't make it about you." "Now," Dad said, standing up, rubbing his palms like he was warming them on a fire. "The big surprise is later. But before that, Alina, there's something small for you from me." He reached into his pocket and produced a tiny box the color of petrodollar navy, the kind you get from a coin dealer or a jewelry shop. He handed it to me with a look that was almost expectant. Samantha watched me, amusement curling at the corners of her mouth. Mom leaned forward slightly, eyes bright. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a square of foam, sat a coin. Not a pendant, not a charm, a coin. A dull bronze disc with some commemorative insignia stamped on a Tower State seal on one side and a stylized eagle on the other. My stomach dropped in that slow, sick swirl, like an elevator descending too fast. "A limited edition," Dad said. "They minted them for the bicentennial of the county. Remember? Valuable someday. A good investment keepsake. For your future." I stared at the coin. It stared back, indifferent and heavy. For a second, I thought of all the things I needed: textbooks, rent, the laptop with the shattered hinge that I'd been nursing along like an old dog, and realized the coin was both generous and useless, like a framed stock certificate to someone who can't afford dinner. "Thank you," I said, because what else was there to say? My voice sounded far away, as if someone else had borrowed it and was trying to do me a favor. Samantha giggled just a little. She tried to hide it with a cough, but it escaped anyway. Mom shot her a warning look that didn't contain any real warning. Dad misread my silence. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You're sensible," he said. "That same old refrain. You understand value. Not everything has to be flashy." "Right?" I said. "Value." I closed the box and placed it gently on the coffee table. "It's fine. It's fine. Just get through today." The doorbell rang and the house swallowed my response. The day began in earnest. The relatives arrived. Aunts with lipstick smiles, uncles with booming laughter, cousins with sticky hands and opinions. Mom slipped into hostess mode, her voice quickly growing brighter, her movements more musical. Dad became the jovial patriarch. Samantha, the star. Alina. Aunt Rosemary kissed my cheek, leaving a faint, powdery print. "You look studious." "Hi, Aunt Rosemary," I said. "Merry Christmas. Are you still doing that? Writing hobby?" She asked, the way you ask a child if they're still collecting stickers. "I'm a creative writing major," I said. "Scholarship. Right? Right?" She patted my arm with sympathy. "At least it will make you well-rounded." I floated through the living room, topping off coffees, passing trays, answering questions about college that weren't really questions. Samantha twirled in the middle of the room, showing off her bracelet, her perfume, her effortless joy. Every now and then, Dad would catch my eye and nod toward the patio doors. "Be ready." I kept my phone in my back pocket for the impending surprise, the way one keeps a bandage ready before the cut. By noon, the house was loud. The ham perfumed the air. The tree lights blinked as if keeping time with the chatter. Dad clapped his hands. "All right, everybody," he said, basking in the volume. "Gather around. We've got something special today." Samantha's face brightened the way a candle leaps when you bring it close to another flame. She took a few steps toward him, then stopped, as if even her eagerness had manners. Dad gestured toward me. "Alina, help me bring everyone outside. And bring your phone." I nodded and did as asked. Guests shuffled into coats, laughter trailing like scarves. The cold hit my cheeks when we opened the door. The sky was a bright winter blue, and the snow on the driveway sparkled like it had been hand-sprinkled with diamonds. I stood to one side, phone ready, fingers numb even though I'd slipped on the knit gloves from my stocking. Samantha stood beside Dad, bouncing slightly on her toes. We formed an arc at the top of the driveway. There, parked by the curb, was a car-sized shape under an enormous red bow and a shiny white tarp that gleamed even in the weak sun. I stared at it, and all the air seemed to leave my lungs at once. It was absurd cinematic. The kind of thing you see in commercials where perfect daughters get perfect gifts from perfect fathers. Mom came out last, breath puffing little clouds, eyes shining as if she too had been gifted something priceless. She took her place beside Dad and grabbed his arm. "Ready?" she asked, almost breathless. "Ready?" he said. He turned to Samantha. "Baby, do the honors." She squealed, an actual squeal, and ran down the steps to the driveway. Dad and Mom followed, taking one end of the tarp. Samantha bowed dramatically to the audience of relatives like an actress ready to receive applause. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked, though of course she knew. "Don't keep us waiting." Uncle Nate shouted. 3, 2, 1. Dad counted. They pulled the tarp in a smooth, practiced motion. And the car beneath flashed into view's leak, cherry red, the sunlight sliding down its hood. A compact luxury brand, the kind I'd seen classmates drive near campus and tried not to envy. The big red bow sat on the roof like a crown. For a second, nobody said anything. Then the crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles, the high-clicking chorus of phone cameras. Samantha put her hands to her mouth, eyes wide with manufactured shock. "Oh my God!" she gasped. "Oh my God!" She turned and flung herself at Dad, and he caught her, his face split with pride. "Congratulations, graduate," he said into her hair. "You deserve it." "Deserve it," Mom echoed, hands clasped dramatically at her chest. I lifted my phone to record because this was my job today. Witness archivist, the pair of hands that keeps the story tidy. The screen framed their joy. Samantha's tears, were they real? Did it matter? Dad's grin, the gloss of the red paint. My breath came shallow. The edges of the scene blurred. Aunt Rosemary sidled up to me and whispered, "Isn't that marvelous?" A sensible car, too. Good choice. Sensible, I repeated. The word curdled in my mouth. Dad had called my coin sensible, too. The irony made something inside me tilt, as if the floor slipped half an inch. "Let's see the interior." Someone shouted. "Does it have heated seats?" "Try the horn." "Start the engine." "Get a photo with the bow." Dad dangled the keys like a game show host. "To Samantha, your first set of keys. Use them well." She squealed again and took the keys. Little snowflakes began to thread the air, delicate, uncommitted. Samantha unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat, her fingers reverent on the leather. The engine purred when she turned the key. People clapped again as if they were applauding a performance. "Stay calm," I told myself, though my hands had gone numb even inside my gloves. "It's fine. It's not about you. Stay small. Stay steady." Dad stood back and looked around at the gathered family like a king surveying a celebration. Then his gaze landed on me and he beckoned. "Alina," he called. "Come get a picture with your sister in the car." I nearly laughed. A picture. Me, the prop, beside the prize. But I swallowed whatever sound curled up my throat and walked down the steps, phone still in hand. The snowflake on my cheek melted into a cold trickle. I stood by the passenger door. Samantha revved the engine, then turned it off so she could pose out the open window. "Make sure you get my good side," she said to me, grin wide. I lifted the phone like a weapon I'd forgotten how to use. Mom drifted to my other side. She lowered her voice to a mother-daughter register she reserved for private scolding. "Smile, Alina. This is a happy moment for your sister." "I am smiling," I said. My face ached. "Big smile," she murmured. "Don't make it awkward." The picture-taking began. Samantha with Dad, Samantha with Mom, Samantha alone with the bow, Samantha pretending to cry, her hands covering half her face like a soap actress. Then it was Samantha and Alina, and Mom hissed, "Fix your hair," and I complied. And we stood shoulder to shoulder, two sisters, one jewel, and one setting. "Say family," Aunt Rosemary chirped. "Family," I said. It sounded like an apology. When the photos were done, the crowd thinned back inside for warmth and food. Dad threw an arm around Samantha's shoulders. "We'll take a little drive later, kiddo," he said. "Show you the feel of it. Can I take it to Rachel's tonight?" Samantha asked, eyes glittering. "We're doing a Secret Santa. We'll see," Dad said, fatherly. "Depending on how the weather holds." Mom squeezed my shoulder with a perfunctory pat. "Help me with the buffet?" she asked, though it wasn't a question. Inside, the house swallowed me like warm water that's too hot. I moved automatically, set out the rolls, refilled the salad, replaced the tongs that someone dropped on the carpet. People milled and praised the ham and toasted my father's generosity as if it were theirs. No one asked what I'd received. A coin doesn't make conversation. I kept my phone in my back pocket. Every time I reached for something, it pressed cold against me, a small rectangle of responsibility. I wondered for a moment if I could slip away to my room and breathe. But Mom's eyes found me each time I drifted too far from the action. Around 2 o'clock, Dad tapped his glass with a fork, the universal sign for attention. The living room hushed. "A toast," he announced, raising his whiskey. He waited, letting the silence plump. He was good at this, commanding central. "To family. To Samantha, who's going to make us proud, and to all the sacrifices we make for one another." He looked meaningfully at Mom. "And to another successful year for Carter Construction." Glasses lifted. "To family," they echoed. I lifted my water and swallowed the words like dust. "And to Alina," Aunt Rosemary added, as if she'd remembered me from a list. "Our scholar." A few people repeated it to Alina, vague and perfunctory, like a postscript on a letter. I smiled and nodded, a postage stamp glued to an envelope. The speeches continued, Samantha thanking her parents, joking about how she had no idea the car was coming. Uncle Nate teasing about parking tickets. Laughter, applause, the rustle of wrapping paper underfoot. I stood near the tree, letting the lights blink against my ankle. Dad turned to me. "Alina," he said suddenly, "say a few words. You're the writer." He gestured with his glass, inviting a performance I hadn't prepared for. All eyes pivoted to me, like sunflowers following a sudden light. Samantha raised her eyebrows, half amused, half wary. "A few words." I could do a few words. I had trained my entire life to make my feelings small enough to fit into respectable phrases. I cleared my throat. "Merry Christmas," I said. "Congratulations to Samantha. The car is beautiful." There was a polite nodding, approving murmurs at my grace. But something in me twisted at the word "beautiful lit," echoed off the inside of my ribs like a laugh from a cavern. I heard my own voice, tinny and thin, and felt the familiar old humiliation rise like tidewater, cold and inexorable. Dad seemed to sense the gap of sincerity. He filled it. "You'll get your turn, Alina," he said cheerfully, as if offering a consolation prize. "When you graduate, we'll talk about something appropriate for you." His tone emphasized appropriate, the way one emphasizes affordable. The room chuckled lightly, conspiratorial. A flush crawled up my neck. I stared down at the coin box on the coffee table where I'd left it earlier. It looked small and lonely, dwarfed by the rest of the debris ribbon curls, torn paper, discarded gift bags. I thought, a coin. I got a coin. The sentence bounced around in my skull like a marble in a tin can. Samantha leaned in, her voice pitched to cut through the murmur. A private jab made public. "Maybe Alina can use her coin to start a car fund," she said, grinning. A few guests snickered. It was a joke. A light sisterly jab that I should have shrugged off, that everyone expected me to swallow. But the room tilted again, just a little, in that nearly imperceptible way that makes you seasick. My heart pounded, thud, thud, thuddened. My palms felt sweaty inside the gloves I'd forgotten to take off. I'm sure Alina appreciates whatever she gets, Mom said quickly, giving Samantha a look that was more for show than reprimand. She's always been grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like the bottom of a coffee cup, dark and bitter. I thought of the dictionary when I was 10, the electric toothbrush when I was 16, the planner this morning, the coin. I thought of the late nights at the diner and the scholarship meetings and my laptop with the cracked hinge. I thought of the way Dad introduced me to his friends as the practical one, a label that excused any lack of extravagance. Someone put a hand on my elbow, Aunt Rosemary again. You know, she said softly, your parents do their best to divide things fairly. Samantha's needs are different from yours. Fairly? I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Out loud I managed, excuse me, and slipped away, past the kitchen. Down the hall, my childhood hallway, with the framed school portraits and the vacation photos where I stood at the edge of the frame. I reached the bathroom and locked the door. The fan hummed. I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at myself in the mirror-flushed cheeks. Eyes too bright, a mouth set in a line I didn't recognize. My reflection looked like a woman who had rehearsed patience and was finally forgetting her lines. I let out one breath, then another, then the kind of laugh that's not a laugh at all. It's not about the car, I told the girl in the mirror. It's about never being seen. I splashed water on my face and counted to 10 the way a therapist once told me to do. I dried my cheeks with paper-thin tissue. When I unlocked the door, I could still hear the parties someone put on music, silverware chiming. I could do this. I could go back and be useful. As I turned the corner, I heard voices near the kitchen, moms and dads. A little hushed, that charged murmur parents use when they think their children aren't listening. I froze, instinct guiding me the way it does when you step onto ice and feel it shift. She could have smiled more. Mom was saying, she makes everything so heavy. She's always been like that, Dad replied. A bit. Intense. Practical but intense. I hope she doesn't sulk all day, Mom said. It's Samantha's moment. It is, Dad agreed. Alina will understand. She's sensible. Then, later, he added, besides, the coin was a good idea. Teaches her to think long-term. If she ever stops obsessing over that writing hobby and gets a real job, she'll thank me. Their voices faded as they moved farther into the kitchen. I stood in the hallway and pressed my back to the wall. The drywall felt colder than the window glass. A part of me wanted to rush in to say, I heard you. I am not a problem to be managed. But another part of me, a older part. The trained part knew that confrontation would be labeled ungrateful, hysterical, dramatic. That part of me was tired of being told who I was. I straightened my sweater and went back to the living room. The music had shifted to a Christmas standard. Samantha was by the car keys on the console, showing them off to a cluster of cousins. It has Bluetooth, she said, thrilled. I'm going to make a playlist. Take Alina for a spin later, Aunt Rosemary suggested. Sisters drive. Samantha shrugged. If she wants, she doesn't really, you know? She fluttered her fingers as if searching for a word, then didn't bother finding it. I picked up my glass of water and took a sip. The coin box still sat on the coffee table. I opened it just to look again, as if repetition might transform it into something else. The bronze gleamed dully. The eagle looked away. Dad came over, hands in his pockets, full of good cheer. You all right, kiddo? He asked. Fine, I said. You know, I'm proud of you, he added, perfunctory. As if that sentence were a bow he could tie around any situation to make it presentable. For what? The question popped out before I could smooth it. He blinked. I felt reckless. For being practical. For being the steady one. For not asking. His smile faltered. For being you, he said, but it came out uncertain. Samantha clanged the keys like bells. I'm going to go put my tote in the car, she announced loudly, to reclaim the center. Alina, film me unlocking it from a distance, okay? It looks so cool. There it was again, my role. Record keeper of someone else's joy. I held up my phone because my body moved even when my heart didn't. She posed at the door. Pressing the fob, the lights blinking a responsive wink. I filmed, Everyone clapped again for reasons I could no longer track. By late afternoon, the snow had committed to falling. The windows were dusted, the yard a soft white hush that should have been peaceful. People began to leave in bright scarves and wool hats, hugging in doorways, promising to meet again sooner than they would. I stacked plates, wiped counters, pretended not to hear Samantha asking Dad if she could please take the car to Rachel's, because it would mean the world. Be back by 11, he said finally. Magnanimous. No highways. You're the best, she sang, and kissed his cheek. And you, Alina? Mom called from the sink. Could you take the trash out? It's overflowing. Sure, I said. I gathered up the bulging bag, the knot taut. The plastic worm with the heat of discarded food and paper and the day's detritus. I carried it through the laundry room toward the back door, where the bins waited under a drift of snow. The cold bit my face when I stepped out. I set the bag down by the bins, then leaned against the brick and let the air burn my lungs. It was quiet here. The only sound, the whisper of falling flakes. I thought of the coin again, of the car, of the conversation I'd overheard. I thought of a childhood spent being useful. A word rose up in me, a simple one, enough. I stood there longer than made sense until my fingertips ached. When I went back inside, Mom was drying her hands and Dad was slipping on his coat. We're going to follow Samantha for her first drive, he said. Just around the block, make sure she's comfortable. You can tidy up. Of course, I said. Samantha swished through the foyer in her new scarf, keys swinging. She glanced at me and her smile sharpened. Want a ride? She asked, fokenness dripping. You can hold your coin up to the window and see if the valet takes it. It was a cheap shot, meaner than her earlier jokes, and it fell into the room with a small, heavy thud. Mom made a face that was supposed to be disapproval. Dad chuckled because he thought it was harmless. Be nice, he said mildly, as if that absolved him from curating a household where niceness could be optional. Something inside me clicked. Not slammed, not shattered, just clicked. Like a lock sliding into place. No, I said. I'll pass. They went out, a little procession of the three of them, the family unit as it had always really been. The door closed. Silence spread like a sheet. I stood very still, listening to the engine purr to life, to the crunch of tires, to the sound of my parents' footsteps on the porch as they clapped and cheered. And then the sounds fell away, muffled by snow and distance, and the house was mine in a way it had never been. I walked to the living room. The tree lights blinked. The coin box waited. I sat on the edge of the couch and looked at it one last time. I picked up the coin and felt its weight, stupidly literal. I turned it over. Eagle, seal, the claim of value that had nothing to do with nourishment. In the quiet, without the performance of family, the day rearranged itself into a pattern I couldn't ignore. The bigness of the car, the smallness of the coin, the emphasis unsensible, the overheard words, the jokes, the task list disguised as love. It formed a line that led to a door I had never let myself open. I stood. I went upstairs to my room, the room that still smelled faintly like childhood and dust. I pulled my old duffel from under the bed. I packed it with the things that were mine and only mine. My notebooks, my tattered favorite book, 2 sweaters that I'd bought with my own money, my toothbrush not electric, my scholarship letter folded carefully into a side pocket. I put my cracked hinge laptop in its sleeve. I stood for a moment and looked around at the posters I never hung because Mom didn't want the walls ruined. At the desk where I'd done homework while Samantha watched TV, on my way out, I paused at my dresser. There was a photo of me and Samantha on a swing set when we were small. In it, I'm pushing her, smiling hair in my eyes. She's laughing, her legs pumping the air. I took the photo and left the frame. Downstairs, I put the coin back in its box and set it in the center of the coffee table on top of the floral planner. I found a sticky note and a pen in the kitchen junk drawer and wrote, "Thank you for the investment. I'm making one too." I put on my coat and my boots. I stood in the foyer and listened for the car vent a block away. I looked around the house, the glossy family portrait on the wall, the polished banister, the gleaming kitchen Mom loved to show off. For once, I didn't see a place that didn't fit me. I saw a place I was choosing to step out of. I opened the door. The cold met me like a friend. The snow was deeper now, fresh and undisturbed, except for the tire tracks leading away. I pulled the door closed behind me and felt the click of the latch as a kind of punctuation. I walked down the steps, past the empty driveway where the red car had been the altar of the day, and turned toward the bus stop at the end of the street. As I walked, my breath plumed. My phone buzzed a message from a coworker at the diner asking if I could cover a shift the day after Christmas. I typed back, yes. It felt like the smallest, truest decision I'd made all day. I didn't look back. Not yet. If I did, I might lose the momentum I had gathered over a lifetime. At the stop, I stood under the plastic shelter and watched the flakes lace the air. And for the first time that day, I felt something warmer than the radiator hush of morning. It was anger. Yes, but also clarity. If they asked where I'd gone, I would say, away, for now, to where I can be seen. The bus's headlights appeared as a soft glow behind the veil of snow. I tightened my hand around the strap of my duffel and breathed all the way down to my ribs. Behind me, somewhere on the next street over, a red car carried my sister forward. A story turning in which I was never meant to be center stage. In front of me, a metal bus with scratched windows pulled up to the curb with a groan that sounded like relief. I got on campus. The driver asked, glancing at the duffel. For now, I said. Then I took a seat and watched my parents' neighborhood slide by a string of houses dressed for warm, while my phone, silent in my pocket, kept whatever messages it would receive to itself. I would answer later. I would explain later. I would apologize for nothing. When the bus lurched onto the main road, I finally allowed myself to look back through the fogged window. The bow on the car had been a crown. The coin had been a lesson. But the road, blank and new with snow, looked like a page. And for the first time that day, felt like I might be the one holding the pen. The bus ride back to campus should have been the end of it. I had done the unthinkably, had walked out of my parents' house on Christmas Day. Coin left behind like a mocking little tombstone for 20 years of practical love. I thought the humiliation was complete. I thought the story was set. I was the forgotten daughter, the sensible one, leaving quietly while my sister revved her new car down suburban streets. But life has a way of playing crueler, stranger games. What happened next? The revelation that would twist the knife wasn't something I expected. And it didn't come from my parents. It came from Samantha. When the bus hissed to a stop near the frozen quad, I stepped into the wind, duffel on my shoulder, and felt the sting of freedom cut through me like glass. The dorm buildings were dark. Everyone had gone home, but I had managed to borrow a spare key from the RA before break. My room was quiet, drafty, and smelled faintly of the curry my neighbor had cooked weeks ago. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a coworker. It was Samantha. Samantha, where'd you run off to? Mom is fuming. Lol. Dad says you're being dramatic. I stared at the text, my thumb hovering. Another buzz. Samantha, you seriously left over a coin. That laugh. I could hear it in my head, sharp and cruel. I locked the screen and tossed the phone onto the desk. But it kept lighting up in the corner of my eye. Samantha, don't worry. I'll take care of the coin for you. Maybe I can use it at the gas station. Samantha Elena, the historian. Always collecting useless things. Samantha, they gave you what you deserve. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall. Instead, I let it buzz until the battery drained. The next morning, I went into work at the diner. Christmas brunch shifts are brutal families crammed into booths. Kids screaming, tips small because people think holiday cheer should count as currency. But I welcomed the noise. It was better than silence. Halfway through pouring coffee for a grumpy couple, I heard the door chime and froze. Standing at the entrance, shaking snow from her scarf, was Samantha. She looked out of place in the vinyl and linoleum world of the diner, her luxury boots squeaking on the wet floor. Heads turned. She spotted me instantly, and her smile spread like oil on water. Alina? She sang loud enough for the whole diner to hear. So this is where you've been hiding. I set the pot down harder than necessary. What are you doing here? Relax, she said, sliding into a booth without asking. Dad told me not to, but I had to see you. You stormed out like some dramatic movie heroine. It was hilarious. I'm working. Good for you, she said, eyes darting around at the chipped counter. The cracked pie display. I guess somebody has to. The words stung more than they should have. But then her phone buzzed and she giggled. Rachel wants to take a ride in the car tonight. Everyone's dying to see it. You should come. I'm not getting in that car. She tilted her head. Still bitter? I'm done playing second place, Samantha. I mean it. For the first time, her smile faltered. Just a flicker, like a light bulb about to die. She leaned forward, voice dropping. You think you're second place? Oh, Alina, you have no idea. That sentence stuck with me the rest of the shift. You have no idea. What did she mean? Samantha had everything: attention, gifts, ease. What else could there be? That night, while I tried to study, she texted again. Samantha, you're mad at the wrong people. I didn't reply, but the seed was planted. 2 days later, the seed split open. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me swipe. A raspy voice greeted me. Is this Alina Carter? Yes. This is Officer Daniels, local PD. We're calling regarding your sister, Samantha Carter. My stomach dropped. What happened? She was pulled over early this morning in a red vehicle registered to your father. Multiple infractions, reckless driving, suspicion of underage drinking. We contacted your parents, but she listed you as her emergency contact as well. What? She's been released, but you may want to check in. I hung up, pulse racing. A text from Samantha arrived moments later. Samantha, before you hear it from Mom, Dad. Yes, I got stopped. No big deal. Don't freak. I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring. Why did the police call me? I demanded. Because I told them to, she said casually. I couldn't have Mom fainting in the station, could I? Samantha, relax. They let me go. Dad smoothed it over, as always. You were drinking, maybe a little. She laughed. But that's not the big news. The big news is what I found in the glove compartment. My throat tightened. What do you mean? Documents, Alina. Papers. Do you know why Dad was so happy to give me the car? Because it's not new. It's not even fully paid off. He leased it under the company name. It's basically a showpiece, a tax trick. And you know what else? There's paperwork with your name on it, too. Financing office. To the university? To the state tax board? That was a lie hadn't yet. But the way Dad's face crumpled told me it was a believable one. Mom hissed. How dare you embarrass us like this? No, I said coldly. How dare you use me like this? Samantha, desperate, tried to laugh it off. She's exaggerating, she's just jealous, but no one laughed with her. Eyes narrowed. Guests turned away. The Golden Girl's shine was flickering. And for the first time in my life, I watched my sister stumble. I gathered the papers back into my folder. I'll be leaving now, I said. But just so you know, the sensible one isn't so sensible anymore. I'm not your coin. I'm not your collateral. I'm not your shadow. I turned to the guests once more. Thank you for witnessing this. Sometimes the truth needs an audience. And then I walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. Raised voices. Guests murmuring about legal trouble. My father's booming tone cracking into panic. My mother's high-pitched scold turning shrill. Samantha crying real or fake, I couldn't tell. But I didn't stop. I stepped into the night air, snow crunching under my boots, and felt the cold kiss my skin like absolution. The next morning, I kept my promise. I emailed the documents to the financing office and the university's legal counsel. By evening, I got a response. They were investigating. Word spread quickly in our town. Carter Construction wasn't the proud, untouchable company anymore. It was the firm that tried to game the system with their own daughter's scholarship. Clients began to withdraw. Business partners pulled out. Samantha's car, repossessed within weeks. The bow, the symbol of her glory, ended up in the trash. As for my stayed on campus, working shifts, writing in the quiet hours. My scholarship remained untouched once the fraud was proven to be my parents' doing. And for the first time in my life, I felt more than sensible. I felt powerful. I had taken my humiliation and turned it into justice. I had been their invisible daughter, their coin to spend, but by exposing them, I had finally written myself into the story. And this time, I wasn't background. I was the author. When you've lived your entire life in someone else's shadow. Stepping into the light feels unnatural at first. It's almost blinding. The week after New Year's, the fallout spread faster than my name. "Yes," she said, smug. "Turns out dear old dad used your scholarship status-assured dependability to qualify for some kind of financing deal. He leveraged your info without asking. That's the only reason he could swing the lease." I gripped the phone until my knuckles hurt. "You're lying." "Check the glove box yourself," she said sweetly. "Or don't. Either way, you're not just the forgotten daughter, you're the collateral." And then she hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, heart pounding. Collateral. My father had used me, not just emotionally, not just symbolically, but financially. My scholarship, my practical reputation, had been turned into paperwork to buy Samantha a crown. The humiliation of Christmas morning wasn't just about unequal gifts. It was theft disguised as generosity. And Samantha, my sister, who had mocked me all my life now, held the truth like a weapon. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled. For the first time, the anger wasn't just a fire inside me. It was a blade, sharp and gleaming, pointing outward. I whispered to myself, they wanted me invisible. They wanted me useful. But now I know. The twist wasn't that I was unloved. I had always known that deep down. The twist was that I had been exploited. And if that was true, if my parents had crossed that line, then I wasn't powerless anymore. Because with knowledge comes leverage. The moment Samantha hung up on me, I knew Christmas morning wasn't the humiliation, was just the opening act. The true betrayal wasn't the coin versus the car, but what had been hidden inside the paperwork. I sat there on my narrow dorm bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning. For 20 years, I had told myself I was invisible. The sensible one. The background daughter. But this was proof I hadn't been invisible at all. I had been useful. My scholarship, my good credit, my name. They weren't ornaments my parents were proud of. They were tools. Tools to prop up Samantha's pedestal. And suddenly, the shame I had carried all my life hardened into something new. Not tears. Not despair, steel. They had underestimated me for the last time. I went to the library the next day, half closed for the holidays. Quiet except for a few stragglers tapping away at laptops. I logged into the university's computers, searched for every database, every public record I could access. Vehicle registrations, county tax filings, Carter Construction's company documents. And there it was, buried in a digital PDF. The red car wasn't bought, it was leased. Under Carter Construction, co-signed with my name. The justification column read, dependent with academic status qualifies for reduced financing tier. My breath caught. My name. Used without my consent. I printed the documents, my hands shaking but steady enough to slide the pages into a folder. Evidence, hard proof of betrayal. Then I called Samantha. "Don't you want to tell me I was right?" She asked smugly. "You were," I said flatly. "But thank you for handing me the knife." She laughed, not understanding. "You're so dramatic, Alina." "No," I said quietly. "You'll see what dramatic looks like." I knew what I had to do. If my family loved performance, if they thrived on appearances, then the stage had to be public. And what better stage than New Year's Eve? Every year, my parents threw a party, clients, relatives, neighbors, all crammed into the house with champagne and small talk. It was their pride and joy, their yearly performance of success. I still had the invitation in my inbox. So I planned. I printed extra copies of the documents. I drafted what I would say. I even rehearsed in front of the cracked mirror in the dorm bathroom, whispering lines to myself like a soldier preparing for war. By the time December 31st came, I wasn't trembling anymore. I was calm, cold, ready. The house was glowing with lights when I arrived, folder tucked inside my coat. Music thudded faintly through the walls. Cars lined the street, expensive ones, their owners already inside, sipping Dad's whiskey and praising Mom's hors d'oeuvres. I rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile freezing when she saw me. "Alina," she said, tight-lipped. "You came." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Wouldn't miss it." She let me in, though suspicion clouded her eyes. I slipped through the crowd, accepted a glass of sparkling cider from the caterer, and scanned the room. Dad stood by the fireplace, booming laughter rolling through the guests. Samantha floated near the staircase, basking in attention. Car keys dangling from her wrist like jewelry. Perfect. At exactly 10 o'clock, Dad clinked his glass. "Friends, family, thank you for joining us tonight. Another year of growth, of love, of success." Applause filled the room. Samantha preened. Mom glowed, and I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice louder than I thought it could be, "I'd like to make a toast, too." The room hushed, startled. Dad blinked. "Alina," he said, "this isn't the time. It's exactly the time." I raised my glass. To family. To honesty. And to finally being seen. Whispers rippled. Samantha rolled her eyes. "Oh God, here she goes." I set my glass down, pulled the folder from my coat, and opened it with deliberate calm. "Did you all know," I said, holding up a page, "that the beautiful red car my sister received wasn't bought out of love? That it wasn't even fully theirs to give?" A gasp traveled through the room. Dad's face paled. "This car," I continued, "was leased. Under Carter Construction. Co-signed without my consent. With my name, my scholarship status, my credit. Used as leverage to make my sister's gift possible. I laid the papers on the coffee table like cards in a game of poker." Guests leaned forward, eyes darting between me and the documents. Dad stepped forward, face red. "That's enough, Alina." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's not enough. It's never been enough. Not when I was 10 and got a dictionary while she got a dollhouse. Not when I worked nights to buy my own laptop while she had everything handed to her. Not when you called me sensible, practical, invisible, and then used my name as collateral to crown her queen." The room was silent except for my own breathing. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Samantha's face drained of color. "You talk about family," I said, staring at Dad, "but family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't humiliate one child to glorify another. Family doesn't use love as a transaction." I turned to the guests' clients, relatives, neighbors who had always seen us as the perfect Carters. "Here's the truth. This family runs on lies. And tonight, I'm done playing along." The reaction was immediate. Guests whispered furiously. One of Dad's business partners picked up a page and frowned deeply. This is fraud," he muttered. Another aunt clutched her pearls and looked at my mother with horror. Dad tried to bluster. "It's a misunderstanding, it's evidence," I cut in. "And it's mine now. I've already sent copies to the even I anticipated." My parents stopped calling. Not that they were silent, they were busy trying to patch their crumbling reputation. Business partners whispered about lawsuits. Mom's bridge group stopped showing up. Dad's booming voice no longer filled crowded rooms because the rooms had emptied. And Samantha. She lost the crown she'd worn her whole life. The car was repossessed just like I knew it would be once the financing office opened the investigation. The neighbors gossiped. Her friends, the ones who adored her shiny toys, began to drift away. Without her props, she was just another girl. Meanwhile, I was free. At first, the quiet was strange. No one barking orders, no one comparing me, no one reminding me to smile while my sister soaked up the attention. I would wake in my dorm bed, half expecting my mother's voice to slice through the door. Or my father's sigh of disappointment, or Samantha's giggle at my expense. But all I heard was silence. And silence, I discovered, can be healing. I started to write again. Not essays for class, not half-finished stories stuffed in drawers. but real writing, the kind that poured out of me like water from a cracked dam. I wrote about invisible daughters. I wrote about families that broke their own. I wrote about coins, shiny and worthless, and cars that were crowns until the wheels came off. My professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Howell, pulled me aside after reading a draft. "This," she said, tapping the page, "isn't just homework. This is testimony. You need to share it." And for the first time, I believed her. 3 weeks after the New Year's party, my phone rang. The screen flashed, "Mom!" My stomach twisted. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. Alina, her voice came tight and strained. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked calmly. "You humiliated us." "No," I said. "I exposed you. You've destroyed this family." "No," I repeated. "You destroyed it when you decided I was collateral." There was silence on the line. A silence so thick I could hear her breathing. Then she said we only wanted what was best for both of you. I laughed, bitter. "No, you wanted what was best for Samantha. I was just the resource you mined to get it." "Alina," she whispered. For the first time, I thought I heard something like regret. But regret isn't an apology, and it doesn't undo years of neglect. So I said, "I don't hate you. But I don't owe you forgiveness. I'm done being useful to people who never saw me." And then I hung up. I cried after, not because I doubted myself, but because even victories leave scars. Samantha tried to call too. Her messages piled up. "Samantha, you ruined everything." "Samantha, I didn't mean for it to go that far." "Samantha, they're taking it out on me now. Are you happy?" "Samantha, please answer. You're still my sister." I stared at her words, remembering every Christmas, every laugh at my expense, every moment she basked while I shrank. And still, part of me ached for Herbie, 'cause beneath the glitter, she was just as trapped as I had been, only in a different cage. But sympathy isn't the same as reconciliation. So I wrote back one final message. "Me, I hope you learn who you are without the gifts. Sam, that's something I had to learn the hard way. Take care of yourself." And that was it. No more texts. No more late night calls. The silence after that was heavy, but it was honest. People often ask me now when I share pieces of this story in my writing, "Do you regret it? Do you regret burning the bridge with your family?" And my answer is always the same. There was no bridge. There was a leash, and I cut it. Because here's what I learned. Love that comes with conditions isn't love. Being sensible is not the same as being invisible. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop playing the role they've written for you. I used to think revenge was ugly, something to avoid. But real justice sometimes wears the mask of revenge. When you expose the truth, when you stop swallowing humiliation and start speaking, the world tilts. The powerful lose their grip, and you finally breathe. By spring, Carta Construction had lost 2 major contracts. Dad's voice no longer carried through banquet halls. It cracked under the weight of lawsuits. Mom stopped hosting. Samantha left town for a while, embarrassed, stripped of her spotlight. And me. I applied for a summer writing residency. I got accepted. When I arrived, the director asked what I wanted to write about. I told her I want to write about coins and cars. About daughters who get everything and daughters who get nothing. About the ones who walk away and finally choose themselves. She smiled. "That's not just a story. That's a reckoning." And she was right. Sometimes, late at night, I still think of that Christmas morning. The coin in its little velvet box. Samantha's squeal when she saw the car. My father's voice calling me sensible. My mother's hiss to smile bigger. But the memory doesn't hurt the way it used to. Now, it feels like the beginning of something like the first chapter of a book I had to write myself. Because leaving that house, exposing the truth, wasn't just revenge. It was rebirth. I am Alina Carter. I am no one's collateral, no one's coin. I am not the shadow of a sister or the servant of a family's image. I am the author of my own life. And for the first time, that is enough. If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It helps more people discover our channel. And if you love powerful stories of family, betrayal, and justice, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt overlooked the way Alina did? I'd love to hear your experiences. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and remember, the best revenge is living your truth.